Today we're going to talk about building long-term customer happiness. So a little bit about me before we get into that. As Brian mentioned, I'm Aniket. I'm a senior PM at Microsoft. I work in the Windows and Devices group, which is now the Core OS operating systems group. So in my time there, I've been working on a few different projects. One of the ones that I think people might identify with is Windows 10 has a few different versions, editions. You have Home, you have Pro. There's an edition of Windows that caters specifically to workstations, which are big, monstrous machines, which might cost anywhere from $2,000 all the way up to $25,000 or more. If you're a graphic designer professional, you might care about those workstations. So there's an edition of Windows that targets that, and I'm the PM for that. So, and some of the other things that I've worked on are some storage thingies or storage technologies. So storage files on demand, if you're familiar with that. Anyone used OneDrive files on demand? The technology, the storage technology behind that, that's me and my team. Storage Sense is another one. It's been in the news pretty recently, helping with Windows upgrades and stuff like that. That's something that I've worked on as well. Besides that, I've had a journey with bunch of other technologies inside of the OS team, some battery life stuff, some projects for Azure. Sometime before that, I actually transitioned from a developer role. I used to be a dev in the Dynamics team, and then I transitioned into being a PM, and I've been doing that for about 4 years now. And I was a dev for 4 or 5 years, 5 years before that, and then there was some other stuff, and I was born sometime before that. So one quick disclaimer, I guess, all of the content and everything that I'm presenting is based on my experience and opinion, and not necessarily anything that Microsoft is advocating. Quick thing, if you are interested, my team is hiring. So if you are interested and are not worried about getting a little technical, then I'd be happy to have a conversation. I'll hang around after the talk. Let's connect on LinkedIn or however you want. My email is there. Happy to have that conversation. So that I think this talk will help we have a few PMs, people who are enthusiastic about the PM role or future PMs. So I think the content here I catered for sort of this audience, right? And I hope that you'll get 3 things out of this in a much more simplistic way. Customer happiness, and basically what it is and why is it different from customer satisfaction, and why does it matter? How are you going to measure it? And then how are you going to build it? At a super high level, 3 things. That's my goal. So with customer happiness, I want you to think about a time recently that you were really happy with the product or service. Could be anything. Could be a restaurant that you went to and the service was really great, or a new product that you purchased. Maybe it was technical, like technology was an electronic product or something else. It could be a car. I've been a Prime subscriber, Amazon Prime subscriber for a bit. How many people here have Amazon Prime? Quite a few, right? So there have been few instances where I really realized that I'm really, really happy as a Amazon Prime customer. So once, I don't remember what I bought, but I remember it was some electronic thing that I purchased, a few $100s. I came home and the package is gone, as happens, not too uncommon, right? So I called customer care and said, hey, your tracking shows that it's been delivered, but I'm here at my doorstep and it's not here right now. And I expected to have a big fight, and like they were like, no, we delivered it, it's your problem now. If it's gone, it's gone. Like, we can't help you, we delivered it, our job is done. But they didn't do that. And that's what was amazing. What they did was they said, okay, not a problem. We're really sorry that has happened to you. Let's go fix that, and we'll ship you that object and you'll get it tomorrow. And that's it? Like, is that it? So he said, yeah, okay. All right, thank you. And then I think it wasn't even the next evening. The next morning, they had it overnighted and it was there. And so at that point, I was like, that is amazing. I mean, as a customer, maybe it was my fault, maybe it wasn't my fault. certainly wasn't Amazon's fault. They did fulfill their obligation. It was there, but they went an extra mile to make sure that as a customer, I was super happy with the service that they were providing. And so from that point on, I've had a couple of incidences that are sort of similar. One where because of some inclemental weather, they could not get a package on time, even though they said they would get it on time, and I was kind of banking on it. So I called them, and they still pulled in a few strings and made it happen. So at that point of time, I was like, this is amazing. So that's my personal story. Another one is Surface Studio. If you haven't played with one of these, I would encourage you to. If you're in the Bellevue Square Mall, there's a Microsoft store. My kids really like this. So as a parent, I am super happy with this product as opposed to having a desktop or a TV. I think my son was like about 20 months old when he figured out how to hold the pen and like do the little colors. Like he wouldn't make anything that would make sense, shapes, but he would be learning with colors, and he'd be learning how to change the colors, learn through the UI elements. And it was amazing. So as a parent, that was amazing. So at that point, and so it continues now. My younger son is also going along that same path. So as a customer, super happy with these things. Now we'll look into what's the difference that made me go from being just satisfied and like, yeah, I like them, to like, oh yeah, I really like them. I'm going to tell my friend about it, and I'm going to go tell my family about it, and like I'm basically going to go advocate about this, right? So with customer satisfaction, you're looking at something that's typically point in time. So you call customer service, for example, they help you out, and are you satisfied with the service that you receive? Yes or no? Like that's kind of it. We released a new feature as part of our service or product. You used it. Are you satisfied with what you saw? Yes or no, right? So with happiness, it's a little bit more longer than that. You're looking at, if you think about something that has made you happy, it's typically something that you had a good experience with it in the past. You're having a good experience with it now, but there's also a small element to that is forward-looking. You expect that you will continue to have a good experience with it. And so when you do talk to your friends, you talk to your family or colleagues, whoever, you're talking about having that good experience in the future, and you're advocating for that, saying, hey, I bought this new phone. It is really cool. It takes really great pictures. And so, I don't know, maybe try it out, right? So it has a more anticipated, you're anticipating that you'll continue to have that great experience, and you're going to be a happy customer from that point on. So satisfaction and happiness, they're not exclusive, right? So satisfaction is, I would say, a stepping stone. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient to get to the point where you have happy customers. And the last thing I think is that happiness, as opposed to customer satisfaction, includes a much more emotional element. With customers, when you're a satisfied customer, you're like, I was looking for this, I got exactly that. Okay, if tomorrow somebody gives me exactly the same thing, maybe just a little bit cheaper or maybe just a little bit more, would you switch? Maybe, because you're like, yeah, I'm satisfied, but like there's nothing that's keeping me tied into this. And with when your customer is happy, with Prime, it would take, like for example, in my Prime example, it would take something a lot more than just the same priced product to pull me out of there. Same thing with the studio, right? So that's primarily the difference between satisfaction and customer longer-term happiness. So far, so good? Okay, cool, awesome. So that's what's customer happiness. Next, why is that important? Like, why as PMs should we look at that? Why as PMs should we try to build our products and services for that? So, I mean, some of the things, the obvious one, happy customers are going to stick around longer, and they're going to continue to do business longer. As a result of that, your churn, like if you're a subscription-based product or service, your churn is going to be low. Fewer people are going to leave. That means you're going to be under lesser pressure to like, okay, I expect 20% of my users are going to be gone, so I have to make up that 20%. And then, so you're going to have a much more stable business. You're going to be free to innovate a lot more than you would be if you're worried about, okay, how can I keep just my current customers from like jumping ship, right? You're more motivated, and you're more able to solve bigger and bigger problems, and maybe even consider entering into markets that you are not today. Additional to that, you have opportunities for upselling and cross-selling. If you are not a startup, if you have multiple products that are part of your portfolio, hey, you've really liked this. Do you want to try this other thing that's super cool? Like, for example, Google does this thing when you're using Chrome, right? You're using Chrome and you're like, hey, YouTube, do you want to get a subscription? Or if you're using YouTube and you are not on Chrome, you're on Firefox or Edge or any other browser, hey, do you want to try Chrome? So you have those kind of opportunities. And they become much more effective if your customers are happy with what you have, what they have today, with the current service and with the current product that they're using, that you're providing for them today. And as I said, with Amazon Prime or with the Surface Studio example, like I'm talking about that because I'm happy about that. So in a way, it's like free marketing. Like you have your customers who are advocating on your behalf. You're not asking them to, nobody's asking them to, nobody's paying me to do it. But since I've been a happy customer, I'm going to tell my friends, like, you should go try this out, like super cool stuff, right? The other thing is brand value. And that gives you a few other things. As a PM, maybe we look at brand value, maybe we don't. But it allows you, your company, to, again, get into this motion of, we have built some amount of brand in this, like maybe with Apple with the iPhone, but taking that same value and saying, now we have AirPods. They're not just wireless earbuds that somebody sells. They are wireless earbuds, they're AirPods that Apple sells. So that brand value accrues to any new thing that you develop. So that's something that you get as well. So now that we've looked at what customer happiness is, why that's important, now how we're going to measure it. One of the most basic things I think that probably will surprise no one is customer satisfaction, CSAT. It's basically you ask your customers after periodic intervals, any interaction they have, maybe you randomly pick people, or after there's a new release, some new features have gone out, you've done a new UI, completely new UI, like Gmail did. I don't know what their CSAT looks like, but so yeah, I mean, this is basically you ask a question of, are you satisfied with blah, the new release, this UI, your interaction with customer care? And they give you a yes, no. It could be yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down. Or it could be rate us on the scale of 1 through 5 or 1 through 10. There are a number of ways of doing it. You could reach out to people. You could just blast emails to doing it. There are a few things that might help in the process. If you don't make people jump through hoops, a tiny link is hidden somewhere in the email, and then you're like, okay, I have to answer like 50 different questions to get there. So it usually helps to have something that's maybe 2 questions, and that's kind of it. So that's the CSAT. That measures satisfaction, but doesn't really go all the way towards happiness. Something that we were talking about is people, your customers advocating on your behalf, and that's that promoter score. These are customers that are actually saying, or will be willing to recommend your product or your service to others. And so this is a metric that you would want to track pretty closely, actually. And you don't just track these metrics in point of time. You want to track the trends as well over a period of time, and you want to do some correlation analysis. So we release something or something happened, and then maybe there's a dip or maybe it really went up. And at the same time, you also want to have another field when you ask people these questions. If you're doing it over email, you also want to ask why. And that's important because you're not just, otherwise you're like, NPS went up, that's great. But what did we do? Okay, we released something new, but it was this big thing. Like, what exactly did the customers like out of that, right? So it gets a little bit dicey. Something else that is, you don't really need to ask your customers, but you can really infer it much more closely, is your renewal rate. And this can be a little bit different if you are a more like an e-commerce website where you are seeing how many people come back versus a subscription service like Amazon Prime or Netflix or something similar, where you are getting a monthly fee. So in that case, how many of your customers stay your customers after each billing cycle? And you're measuring that as a measure. It's a measure of loyalty, and it's an indicator of happiness, but not exactly measuring customer happiness. Something that really does help, though, is average customer lifetime and the lifetime value of a customer. This is This is related with the renewal rate. This basically your average or your customer lifetime is when you acquire a new customer, how long do you expect this customer to be with you? If I signed up for Netflix, how long am I going to be a customer with Netflix for? And that affects a few different things along with how much will you earn from a customer. And so that helps with other things like what is the cost to acquire a new customer, like CAC. And so if your cost to acquire a new customer is $10 and the lifetime value of your customer is like $9, then it's like, is it really worth it now? So it helps in multiple other places along with measuring how happy your customers are. So with CSAT, just to summarize, there are a bunch of other metrics, but just to summarize, CSAT is more immediate. It's a leading indicator. It's necessary but not sufficient. NPS goes a little bit further and says, will you recommend this product to your friends and family? If you're a Windows user, you might see the little pop-up that says, would you recommend this release of Windows to friends and family? So that's one of the reasons we're at Microsoft. We're internalizing that this is really, really important, not just being satisfied, but being a promoter of our products, right? Renewal rate, again, measuring loyalty and LTV, really that's where the business is, like how much money are you going to make from a customer. There are, as I said, there are quite a few other metrics, like daily active users, monthly active users. If any of you follow Facebook or the recent Facebook earnings call, you'll notice that they are always talking about what are the daily active users. We have 1.something billion, right? Because if your users are not, if you don't have active users, then there's no chance for them to be happy because they're not using your product frequently enough, like once in a year. Okay, maybe not, right? How many support incidences do you have per unit time, per customer? You can slice and dice that, but that's also important to track. If your customers are frequently calling and those support tickets, like the time to resolution is also pretty high, not like you probably want to do something about that, but it's important to track regardless, right? More data is always good. Referrals, if your customers are happy, not only are they saying, yes, I will recommend you, but they're actually going a little bit out of their way and saying, okay, here's my friend's email address or here's my family's email address, send them a link to some app or whatever, it depends on your product. In addition to that, it's also important to really have some success metrics. So this will really depend on what your product is. And so you want to know what a successful customer using that product looks like, and then you want to track that. Like maybe they created something and sharing that, like if it was Facebook or Instagram, sharing that would be a success metric. So how many times are our users doing that? And so you want to track that metric to make sure that if you're helping your customers succeed, then you're potentially making them happy and stick around with you for a while. All right, so a few caveats. When you do these measurements, when you send out surveys, when you're asking your customers, how are you doing it? Are you making sure you're being inclusive? Are you accounting for? Are you just listening to a vocal, small but very vocal minority? People are like, no, we don't like that. Like that's super bad. Are you making sure you're including people from different geographic locations? So if your product or service spans across the globe, are you including people from different parts of the country, different parts of the world? In addition to that, you really have to be careful about the metrics that you track because that can influence your direction that you take your team in. And you want to be careful with these vanity metrics. Like how many people remember page views and this page hits? Like you go to a web page and you see that little thing, 50,000 people. Like it's good that 50,000 people arrived on your homepage, but like what does that tell you? What happened like after that? Like what kind of action would you take on that? Right? I don't know, like, okay, what happened? Did these people find what they were looking for? And app downloads is kind of similar. It's good to know how many people. That tells you what your ceiling is, like 1 million downloads of your app on the iOS store. That tells you what your ceiling is, but doesn't tell you like what happened after that. Like did they even log in, create an account? Did they try it out, or did they just uninstall it like 5 minutes later? Like, you don't know. So you have to be careful with the metrics that you pick. And now, moving on from, so we talked about what is customer happiness. We talked about why that's important, the metrics that you'll use to measure. And now going on to building customer happiness, right? So the first and the most, I suppose, obvious, but still the most important thing is to have a very clear value proposition. There's a reason your customers are doing business with you. You're solving some real world problem for them, or you're providing something that they find valuable. So you have to have a value proposition, and you have to have a value proposition that's super clear, right? It's important to nail the fundamentals. It's important to be performant, have a performance service, security. If like don't be the data breaches that have been happening, I won't go into the details. Privacy is important depending on where you are and your customer base, and that definitions of all of these things can vary. For a group of people, it could be 500 milliseconds is good enough. For a group of people, it could be 1 minute, 1 second. It really varies, but it's important to have those fundamentals. These are basically just table stakes. This is necessary, but it's not sufficient. So to get to that part of where we want to be, a clear value proposition is important. Along with that, it's not necessary, or it's not sufficient to get there once. You have to keep on doing that. Things change, people's problems, the problems that people are facing change, cultures change, a lot of things change, and so continuing to innovate on an ongoing basis is especially important. Like, there are multiple examples, something like what is happening with the iPhone, where there have been going ups and downs, and the sales numbers are down because people are like, okay, why am I going to buy a new phone again every year? Because it's kind of still the same. So there is a need to be in that game and continue to innovate and provide value and solve newer and newer problems. And I mean, this is just a quick example. This is something that I went through recently, and I thought it might be interesting to talk about in terms of value proposition. So I have 2 kids, grandparents visit. We used to have 2 cars, between me and my wife. And so my requirements were simple. Now it's a bigger family, need 3 rows, needs to be safe, needs to be comfortable, because I'm going to have to put 2 car seats, large car seats in the middle row, right? And in the end, after doing all of the research and test driving, I landed on the Volvo XC90. Safety ratings, when I made that decision, they were the best. And then, like literally weeks after, I think Model X safety ratings were out, and that was literally the only car that had better safety ratings than this. And in terms of, it was like 2x more expensive. So, it's comfortable. 3 rows. I'm 5'10", and I sat in each of the rows, and I could, like, people 5'10" could sit in each of the 3 rows and be comfortable. So you get an app that works with the car. You can start your car remotely. The heater turns on. The AC turns on. You can know how much gas do you need to fill up gas. You can unlock the car. You can do all kinds of cool things. And so the value proposition was very clear. And when I looked at this, I was like, yeah, okay, this like makes total sense to me. So it's important. So to pick an example that maybe we can go through as we go with building customer happiness, right? If you've seen anything that Microsoft does, Contoso is like our favorite fictional company. We just like to use that name for whatever reason. So Contoso is a company, let's say, and let's say like, hypothetically, let's just say they're like Instagram, but for photos. But for photo prints. Instagram is for photos, and Contoso is for photo prints. So, I mean, that one sentence does tell you the value proposition. Kinda, right? Like, that means if you're saying we are like Instagram, it tells you that we are going to make it easy for you to make your photos look good when you print them. It doesn't go into like print where, like maybe it's pictures or on a mug or a t-shirt or calendar or something else. But maybe it at least gives you that idea, right? And you'd be performant with Instagram. You take a picture and it uploads. By the time you're done typing some text or making some edits on it, it's already there, post, and it's literally there. So you'd expect some similar kind of performance guarantees with this new service. So we'll take that example going forward as well. Defining the next thing, we looked at the metrics, but identifying and defining what those metrics are, defining the right KPIs for your product is super important as well. And I mean, for that, you have to first ask yourself the question, what does a happy customer look like for you? Happy customer exhibits certain qualities. Maybe they refer other customers more. Maybe they share something more. And so those are the metrics that you want to track, right? Right. So then going back to our example, what do you think customer happiness looks like? One thing that we did not talk about previously, but is important to consider, if you see customers tweeting about you, that's it, right? Yeah. Like, hey, got some amazing prints from Contoso, like of my grandkids or whatever, my dog, something, and this calendar, it's New Year, like stuff like that, right? And those are the metrics that we would track. True, makes sense. So number 3, this starts to get into the meat of what a PM's job really is, knowing your customers, right? And it really is about many things. One is, what is the customer trying to do? What problem are they trying to solve? What are their goals? And sometimes, or in fact, a lot of times, their goals might not have anything to do with what your product is or your service is, but that helps you understand their mindset. Like, I want to be able to view pictures of my grandsons whenever I want. Might be a customer's goal. Like, you're not in the business of making phone apps to show pictures, but the story over here is they're not technically inclined people, and they want something that they can keep on the mantelpiece, and every time they walk, they want to be able to see that. Every time they're in the kitchen, they want to see those pictures. And so now it becomes relevant to you. So you really want to understand what your customers' goals are. To do that, you have to go talk to your customers, understand, and really get to the
bottom. They need points in the wall, and holes in the wall because they want to put pictures there.
Pictures there. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, true. Right. So, and as a PM, one of the core, I think, skills and qualities that we do need to have is being able to separate what a customer needs from what a customer wants or what a customer is asking for, right? Like in this previous example with the goal, what a customer is asking for, like, I want to see my pictures, but that might register differently to different people. It's like, oh, on the phone, this person just wants to view their pictures, or it's on their PC or on their TV. But what they really, really need is to be able to do that in a low-tech way on the mantelpiece or somewhere on the kitchen stuck up with magnets or something similar, right? Always important to consider demographics. Maybe it's age, maybe it's ethnicity, geographic locations. You want to understand all of these things. Even price sensitivity. If you're a new product or planning to bring in a new product into the market, that's important. Even things like preferences, and this goes down different paths. Like, do your customers prefer doing their work more on a mobile device or on a laptop, on a more bigger screen? Do they prefer working while they're sitting on the couch? Like, really depends on your scenario, but it's important to understand these kind of preferences for your customers. The other thing that's important is the decision-making flow, and this is super important, especially if you are a B2B product, because this really, really, really is different from company to company, is different from industry to industry, and consumers, again, is different, and for enterprises, it's super different. In fact, kind of combining that with the other key influencers, it might not even be one single person who's involved in that. Like, when you're outgoing and buying a phone, maybe it's just you and you decide, I'm going to go buy that phone or I'm going to go buy that product. But if it's an enterprise, a lot more people are involved, and collectively they need to be bought in. So you might have the CTO that you might have to convince, and he might be or she might be the one that's writing the check. It might be that there's an IT architect that you have to convince, and he or she has to actually propose or sign off and say, yes, Mr. or Miss CEO, please go sign the check, and I think this is exactly what we need. Maybe there are some other people involved in there as well. All right. So understanding what that flow looks like, to go from we have a problem to your product being the solution, understanding that, and making sure you also understand all of the people involved behind. Maybe your product caters to teenagers. And their parents are the one who are actually paying for it. So yes, you need to convince teenagers, but then you also need to get their parents to buy whatever it is that you're selling, right? So it has those kind of connotations as well. Social media habits, we just talked about something like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, right? And there's a lot more that goes on. So really, the meat and potatoes of being a PM is really understanding your customer. I think it was Einstein who said that if I had to solve a problem, I would like to spend like 70-something% of the time just understanding the problem before even I jump to the solution. So this for a PM is the thing. Spend most of your time really understanding the customer. And it's not even something that you do once and then you kind of are like, all right, we've done this thing, we've done our little tour, we've gone and talked to people, and like we can kind of sit back maybe and do it again next year. You have to have that ongoing cadence. And as a PM, I think something that's helped me is bringing these kind of interactions in to the development team and to the engineering side, and maybe sometimes even taking the engineering team into some of these interactions. It helps you build, it does two things. It helps you, it helps your engineering side empathize with the customers, and we'll get to that in a minute as well. But at the same time, it helps your engineers understand like who are the kind of people that are going to be using their product.
Oh yeah, you have to tell them often to make them sure that they will be also the advocates of your product as much as you are.
Yes, absolutely. And inviting them or bringing your customers in to have those kind of conversations is always a good thing. Like something that I've done whenever you do something like I've done this a couple of times in the past. If you do like a sprint demo or something, having your customer come in and talk, that always helps. That really helps. So there's a persona which ties all of your customer knowledge together. It's not an average of what your customer look like, but it is a representation of what your customers look like, and you can have multiple personas. So this was one of the personas when I was in Dynamics. Nancy, she was a super salesperson, and there was a lot of information about this person, like her age, her experience, like what she does, what are her responsibilities, what are not her responsibilities, but still things that she wants to stay on top of. So things like that give you a better idea. There are a bunch of other tools that can help you build like really good persona, and there are persona templates that you can use. So I touched upon this a little bit. The fourth thing is to building empathy. And that really means that you relate to the pain that your customers feel when they are faced with the problem that you're trying to solve. It's not just being aware that it's there. It means that you can actually feel it, because one of the biggest reasons to doing that would be eating your own dog food. Now, this can be difficult in some scenarios, but for the most part, I think this should be possible, depending on your product. If you're building an OS, use it. Use the latest and greatest in whatever state it is in. Use it as your daily machine. Use it on your laptop, use it on your desktop. If you're building a phone, use that. If you're using an app, find a way to incorporate that into your daily repertoire. Find a way to include that in your processes at work. Like we did this in the Dynamics team. Like we're not salespeople, so we didn't really need like a CRM, like a customer relationship management tool. But what we did is we customized it to keep track of bugs and issues and things like that. So we used it, and so we felt the pain quite a bit. We were like, oh, when we perform this operation, this is kind of the so all right, we need to go fix that problem, right? So you can find ways of adopting that. So and that helps you empathize with your customer. Like, hey, I did this bulk query, and I tried to do that, and it was super painful. Now I can see, like, if somebody has hundreds and thousands of records, like, what kind of pain they're going to feel, right? So this is one of a real example. So I mentioned one of the things that comes out that I worked on is a storage sense, and this is one of the managers in my team sent this email saying, hey, I'm seeing this, like, WTF is going on, even though it's not really a issue in the product. It's a calculation issue, so it's a perception problem. Wasn't a big deal, but it's still like, so you discover all of these things if you are really using your product, and that's one way to empathize. Now we're getting into some of the other things that go from, all right, this is the basic stuff, to, all right, how are we going to build more customers that are more and more happier? Communicating with your customers. Are your customers aware of what are you working on? Are your customers aware that you are aware of the problems that they're facing with, right? Maybe there was a new release that came in and there were some UI changes and they're having trouble figuring stuff out and they're being very vocal. Maybe they went on Twitter, maybe they went on your support channels, maybe they wrote something on your forums or blogs. Are you acknowledging that? And what are you telling them? Are you just saying we are aware of the problem, or are you being honest and transparent? And as PMs, you might butt some heads with the PR. It really depends on the company and the culture, because PR likes to be super defensive and say nothing until we tell you, and we'll give you a very well thought out thing. I don't know. I mean, that works. In my experience, customers, because we've all been on the other end when we've bought something or we've been in the situation where we're not really happy about it. It would be nice if the company would just tell us, yes, we're aware, here's what is going on, and we'll fix it, and just hang on, right? Personally, that's the way that I like to go. Being communicative and accepting that there is some work that is going on. And this becomes even more challenging, again, going back to B2B, this becomes even more challenging, because once your customer is unhappy and leaves, it is super difficult to get them back. It might actually be easy to get a new customer than it might be to get a customer who's left you unhappy, right? So communicating and making them aware that you are aware of the problems and you're working on them, and you're trying to solve them. Maybe it's performance, maybe it might be something small, maybe it might be a big problem, right? So there are few tools that you can use to do this. If you're familiar with user voice, your product or service might have its own channels separately. So make sure that there is some channel that's available where you are communicating. So it's important to have a blog. It also helps to show a non-very corporate-y face where you're talking about what your employees are also doing at times. So people kind of see that there are human beings behind the brand and then the logo, right? And that they care. And so that helps. Complementary to that is you're communicating, you're talking, but you're also listening. Like, make sure that there's a channel where you can be reached at. One, basic one. Two, make sure that your customers are aware of that channel. Like, hey, if you have this, like, blog is there, or maybe it's a support forum, maybe it's a phone number that they can call you at, maybe it's open hours because you're a small enough product, and maybe it's a small enough startup that you can actually meet with the people. Really depends on what your product and your industry that you're working on is, right? So make sure that they're aware, and when you listen, like, you're listening. There's a difference between listening, hearing, and so make sure you're actually listening. And you're not actively trying to solve the problem. Like, your customer is telling you, hey, I had problem doing this, and you're like, you just didn't know what to do. Like, did you try clicking this? Like, what? Right? So you're actually listening, because there may be reasons why they're going through what they're going through, and you'll start to see patterns when you're not immediately jumping into problem-solving mode, let alone like being in a judgmental mode. Coming in with that growth mindset and being open-minded really is going to help you understand and see patterns. So when you're listening, listen. And the last one, customer obsession. This goes back to listening and as well as empathizing. And it's if you have, I don't know how many people are familiar with Satya's book, Hit Refresh. So it's a really good book, and there are some polls in there, and this was one of my favorite snippets in there about. He talks about customer obsession and how to actually build a company that customers value and that customers are happy with us and that they promote us. It's really, really super important to understand customer needs, to empathize with them, be curious, and have that desire to meet their unarticulated needs, right? So that's again goes back to what we were talking about, difference between they're asking you for something, but what they actually need is something else, right? So this is the seventh thing, and this is something that over, I think, my time working on at Microsoft, especially working on the Workstation Edition, a bunch of other products, even some of the projects, some of the work that I did with Azure, really co-creating your product and your features with your customers. So you're not just taking their input, you're actually actively working with them along with a cohort of other teams. So you're probably already working with your sales team. You're already understanding what's going on in the market, working with your marketing team, right? Legal and compliance is probably somewhere in the picture over there. You probably have some kind of an interaction with support. If not, you should, because that serves as a good feedback loop as well. But at the same time, at the table, I also recommend having a customer cohort. Maybe it's like a persona. It's a representation of your customers that you work with, that are there for your early validation. When you're thinking, okay, maybe we should go in this direction. And so along with like marketing guys saying, no, like that's no, because whatever market reasons, you also have customers going, yes, but like this is going to this is kind of works with that, but really it doesn't solve my problem, because if I do that, maybe there's a bunch of other things that are outside scope of your product. So therefore, even though you technically meet the bar, it doesn't really solve the problem. So this, I think, is kind of my secret sauce, and maybe, yeah, it's a meme, and I'm a terrible person for putting a meme up there on a PowerPoint slide, and like, but like we've, as an industry, right, we've gone from there for a long time there wasn't even a role as a PM role, like there wasn't a product manager, or maybe there was some project manager kind of a thing, and like you would go sit in your office and be like, what would that customer need? Like, what would they need? And like, you go and sort of come up with some sort of a spec and something that works. Then things got a little bit better, and we are like, okay, we're going to do something. We're going to go seek feedback. We're going to listen, and then they're going to tell us, and then we're going to work on it, and then maybe a year later we'll have a better product, right? And things got a little bit better again, where you're actively engaging with your customers, you're prototyping and you're checking things before even they get to the final release. But then I think there's opportunity to take it a step further and say that you're actually co-creating with them, and this becomes even more interesting in like a B2B scenario, where you have a product that you're selling to your customers, and you're adding some new feature or new functionality, but to consume that functionality, your customers need to make some changes to consume that. Maybe there are some process changes that are important. Maybe there are some technical changes that they need to make to their existing solutions. Maybe they need to write new code, new features. Maybe need to buy new hardware for that to happen. So to give an example on the Workstation Edition, one of the new features that we added is called NIC teaming. So basically, you take multiple network ports and you make them appear as a single one. So if you had like a 1 gig port, you could take like 5 of them, and now you get bandwidth times 5, right? But that means that you need to have some amount of hardware to do that. So having customers that are part of this process, starting from planning all the way, getting through execution and all the way to release, that helps. It also helps in a bunch of other ways, like for instance, your support people are going to be part of your larger cohort, and they're seeing what is going on, and they're like, okay, that kind of thing happened, so making a note, and what did we do to resolve that problem? So when you actually go out and release, like day 0, your support team is prepared with at least a good list of things that they expect to come up for most of the customers. Because in most cases, what does the support team do? They're working with you, they're looking at what is going on right now, what are the kind of issues that we're getting right now, what does the change, and what do we expect is going to happen? So again, it goes back to like, what do we expect is going to happen on the support side, right? In this case, you have customers, you've seen, you're working with them, and as you develop the product, your customers are working with you, so you see what kind of issues you're going to have, and so your support team is ready. Marketing will love this. They'll jump on this because day zero you have a bunch of case studies that are ready, how people have used your feature and what impact you've had, right? And so in day one, along with saying, here's a cool new feature that you announce publicly to your customers or to the world, you're also saying, here are 5 customers, they're using this today, look how great they're doing with it, right? It's a very different message. Your salespeople are going to be happy because it's like, hey, look at these 5 people. Company A is doing it. Company B is either like competitor or complementary or something. Hey, like company A is doing it, and yeah, how about it, company B, right? So it really goes back, and tying this back to a PM. As a PM, you really are the orchestrator of this process of co-creation. You're like the conductor in this orchestra. You're not playing a particular musical instrument. You're not writing the code. But you are the one that is orchestrating this entire process. You are the one who's making sure that you understand what the customer needs are, what the customer wants, what the customer goals are. And you are the one who's bringing all of these people in together in one place and making sure that everyone is working towards a single common outcome and a single common goal. And so I don't know, sometimes people think that a PM is like or often describe a PM as like a mini CEO. I don't think that's actually the case. A CEO can say, we're going in that direction, marketing, go do that, sales guys, go do that. As a PM, you don't really have that kind of authority. You can't will people into going where you want them to go.
You can influence.
But you can influence, and so having a process in place and being that orchestrator of that process is a great way to bring about that influence. It's also a great way to avoid things that are much more subjective, like, I think we should do that. Like those kind of things just sort of go away because your customers are there. How many people have been in a situation where the engineer goes, no, but I don't think we should do that. We should do X or we should do Y. I've been a dev, and I'll be honest, I've been in that situation where a PM says, no, why should we do that? But having customers in there that are part of that process where you have frequent touch points on, it makes all of that stuff kind of just go away because there's no more subjective bantering. It's all based on fact and data, right? So, yes, this, just wanted to take a moment to mention this because I've seen this come up quite a few times in PMs and PM interviews. I don't know how many people have heard this Henry Ford quote that says, I don't know if Henry Ford actually said this, but he's often attributed to having said this, where he says, if I had asked people what they want, they would have said they want a faster horse, right? So they didn't want a car, they wanted a faster horse. And so the reason that a lot of people like this often gets used is because the argument is people like customers or users don't really know what they want. Maybe we know what they want, so we'll build what we think we know what we think they would want. The thing to look at this quote, I would look at this a little bit differently. Don't fall into that trap, I would say. You want to look at the customer to understand their problem. They understand their problem better than anyone, right? They might not be able to articulate it to you. They might use different words that you might choose. They might, accidentally point you in that direction when they kind of meant that direction. But they do really know their problem and they're living their problem better than anybody else's. So that's what I think is the valuable takeaway there is like, yeah, customer would say whatever, but like don't ask your customers what they would like, but have them talk about their problems and their goals. And then you are the glue, you are the orchestrator that's making sure that you deliver that value back to them, right? So the value in doing this, we touch base on some of these points, like you validate your hypothesis pretty early on. You're not waiting until it's deployed, it's in production, even though you might have some prototypes and you might have, even it might be pencil sketches that you have customers come in and give you input on. There's no real comparison to when your customers are part of your cohort, right? So it really helps, and we talked about like the marketing case study, your marketing, because working on a go-to-market strategy, when you're towards the end, you're executing, you're like, all right, it's time to start working on a go-to-market strategy. Like there's no, your go-to-market strategy is working along with the same pace as your development team is writing code and working on it. Salespeople are happy because you have provided some valuable input to them. It is also, along with the customer cohorts that you're co-creating with, there's also opportunities to generate more leads, depending on how you do that. If you're saying, hey, we would like to head in that direction in the next like 2 years or 3 years, and customers want to work with us, you have opportunities for generating more leads. You have something to give to your sales team that they can jump on right away, right? And again, your customer support team is going to be much more better prepared when you actually launch. There's actually something to be said about the support team as well. Like some choose to look at support as like a break-fix organization, where when something breaks, customer calls them, they give them either a workaround or help them fix it. There's also a way to look at them as like customer success agents. And there's a subtle but important difference between the two. It's different from saying, if something's broken, I'll fix it, versus I'm on point to make sure our customers succeed. So it might mean you might have to do a little more than what your product allows you to do. Maybe you might have to go the extra mile. Going back to the Amazon Prime example, right, that I gave, did fulfill their contract. They did deliver the product. It was there at my doorstep. What happened? It's no longer their concern. But said, nope, we want you to be successful, and our customer success agents are going to make sure that we go there, right? So working closely with the customer support or success team or whatever they're called in your organization always helps in the feedback loop coming from them. Like, what kind of issues are you seeing? All right, so the top issue that you're seeing is that. So let's make sure that before we go on to bigger and better things, let's at least make sure that our current customers are satisfied. Then we can think about making sure that the customers are happy, right? So going back again to our Contoso example, which is this fictional company, like Instagram, but for photo prints. What would co-creation look like? What do you guys think? Let's say you're designing the feature that actually prints things on your phone, and then let's say it's shipped to you at your address, right? Maybe that's the service, let's say. So, and you're now working on the part that actually does the printing. And so in all of these cases, you have, like you said, somebody who has real attention to detail. In that case, you have a real world measure of what quality is good enough for this person. You have somebody who's not too much into quality, but they're more concerned about getting pictures and being able to like frame them or something like that. Like, what kind of quality is acceptable to them? And so you get all of this while you're going through your designs, you're going through your development and execution.